the campaign team and the DMP team, we are starting to visualize and kind of just brainstorm to get a rough idea of how this will look end to end. And understanding that every team is responsible for different parts of the funnel. We just want to make sure that whatever we're thinking is not like completely off from what everyone else is thinking. So we thought we would share the mural of our brainstorming session and see, where the align, where we should align, and if this is something is completely off, then we should tweak accordingly to your plans. And actually, let me share my screen really quickly. So yeah, if you all have access to the mural, that's linked to the agenda, but really taking a look at this example enterprise practitioner persona journey. And just to kind of like give a few background on how we decided to visualize it this way, or the reasoning behind the framework. First, I think we want to make sure that we are in line with the goal of winning with VCC and CI as a land campaign, and utilizing demand-based intent data where available, and then leveraging GitOps content where applicable to help with MQL to SA conversion, just because we've seen just from our learnings with the campaign launch, like the first half of the year, that GitOps actually have really high MQL to SAO conversion. And then also looking at the slides that product marketing produced, which I believe is this one, the use case solutions to categories, thinking that like in order of use case adoption, usually it starts from VCC to CI and then GitOps. So to start with,
just quick clarification though. The use case adoption from VCC to CI to GitOps isn't really the way it would go.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's why we wanted to make sure we got that order right as well.
Well, yeah, I need some. But to be clear, GitOps is doing version control in CI and CD, but in the ops space by a different persona, whereas a developer does version control in CI and CD of deploying an application. One is managing infrastructure and managing their, the configuration of the platform and the infrastructure. That's GitOps, right? So it's a different persona as much as it is. So but GitOps arguably touches on many of the capabilities that you would see in version control in CI and CD, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So it's just touching on different persona, but GitOps is spanning across VCC and CI. Is that kind of correct?
GitOps is using the same tools that a developer would use in DevOps, version control, CI, etc., but it's applying it to their domain and to their challenge, which is infrastructure as code.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense, actually.
Okay. They're related, but it's using the developer's tools, but in the context of someone in operations to manage their infrastructure.
Okay. Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. And with that, then we may want to tweak the framework a little bit, just because then we were thinking about, and I don't know where this fits, maybe Matt and Jackie, we can like align on it, just because then it almost feels like this can be taken out of the, like a practitioner persona journey, but maybe if we can like break it out further and say like, if it is a developer, then maybe just focus on CI and VCC use case, and then we can have a different framework for a practitioner that is in the ops space. That then we just target with GitOps, right? That it feels like that makes sense.
And just to kind of set the scene here, like I know that the campaign managers maybe have been jumping ahead and starting to build out some of the visualization of how we think about running the campaigns, but this needs to be a collaborative, concerted effort. We really need we need to lean on your team's areas of expertise in developing what these persona-based buyer journeys look like. Mm-hmm. So all of this, like your feedback is completely like needed in this. And I think even just coming out of this meeting, if we can define how to build that collaboration and bring the teams along on the journey, that would also really help. But this, I think the CI to VC&C to CI to GitOps was also generated. I shared with them the stage expansion deck that you have, John, by use case. I put it into the notes. That's the one I'm looking at. Case / solutions to categories. So I think that's also where some of the thinking is coming from.
Yeah, which is colloquially known as the 3 a.m. deck that I wrote at 3 a.m. trying to articulate the relationship between things. It's absolutely not what I would consider to be my best work, but it was literally 3 in the morning trying to visualize this. But yeah,
it's really insightful though. I think
it tells a story, but don't take it as gospel. Mm-hmm. Please do not take it as being the it's not the final answer, but it gets the story, it gets the point across. Mm-hmm. But I think that's really important to understand that when we say GitOps, we're talking about totally different persona. And so that's why it's interesting. It's also interesting because the ops side of an organization typically has more money than the developer side of the organization. Their budget's usually much, much, much bigger.
Okay. I think this is helpful though, because then yesterday we were discussing about kind of like, should we include GitOps as part of this journey or just focus on VCC or CI? But it seems like it just depends on the persona. If you're focusing on, right?
And I'm going to actually, do you want me to derail you? How much do you want me to derail you? Because I think we should be talking about cloud native. And the reason I'm going to say this, let me share just for a quick second or two, and I'll share something that I've been working on. And this is a work in progress. I'm working with my team. Literally Thursday, we're going to go double click into this. But it's based upon some of the data from Todd's strategy. It's based upon looking at a couple of things that what we're doing as a team. Parker's seen this, but and I'm going to walk through really fast. But if this is, and y'all are familiar with Todd's second half, the new go-to-market strategy, I've highlighted some key elements about what we're trying to do. Land low, focus on net new orders, specific top of funnel use cases to get started. You're with me, right? 5 slides in one. And then for at least the strategic marketing team, I'm using this as a way for us to build alignment. This is what it means for us. But then I said, because use cases are stored in the opportunity, because the sales reps indicate the use case in the command plan, we can start to understand how they're coding the opportunities. And I did some quick analysis. And I said, what are the top 5 use cases looking at the last 2 years of data in Salesforce? Now this first table is misleading because we didn't have use cases 2 years ago. So there's a whole bunch of blank because they didn't have it. But there's still $140 million worth of IACV attached to use cases. This first list is ordered by how many opportunities. Okay, so the usual suspects show up. Version control and CI. CD shows up, but I think that there were some miscoding things done, and I didn't want to get into the details of debating it. But then there's DevSecOps, then Agile. And then you'll notice cloud native is number 7 on the list of $9 million of IACV in Salesforce. And so then if we slice the data, that same data a little differently, and now filter out the stuff where there's no use case attached to it. Interestingly, now we slice it by new business versus add-on. Notice that cloud native moved up. DevSecOps moved down because DevSecOps is about 50-50 of land versus expand. But look at DevSecOps, cloud native, $7 million is significantly new business. That's interesting. Then slide 4 was another slice I did. Same data again. This time slicing by where is it at, what stage is it at, and to see win-loss. And the story is this, that VCC, version control CI, and DevOps, we win more than we lose. we generally win more than we lose. Cloud native, we win a lot more than we lose. Like 6 to 1, 6 out of 7 times we win versus 1 time we lose. Cloud native was like, blew my mind that there's $900,000 of lost opportunities, but 6.1 million of wins. That was interesting in a big way. But either way, I use this as a way, and I'm going to use this with my team later on to talk about some of the strategies, something we do. I want to share it just from a data for a context perspective. It's not looking at what we see in Marketo and Invisible in pipeline, but it's looking at stuff that's actually in Salesforce closed won, closed status on the opportunity. So data point to share. I'm stopping derailing your meeting. But it's why I think we should at least contemplate playing with cloud native.
One question, what's the quality of that data? Like what percentage of opportunities have the use case filled in? I was taking a look at that, but I wasn't confident that that had representation across the majority of opportunities.
I don't know. I mean, I need to do a double check on the quality of, I mean, it's sales rep entered. I mean, it's whatever a sales rep has recorded. So it's as good as the sales reps are. And,
yeah,
you know, they are expected to enter that data at stage 2 and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's going to vary by sales rep. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to give us a clue. And I share it only because I think it gives us a clue. But either way, the cloud native win-loss was surprised me. That really surprised me. But it validates, I think, version control and CI as being our focus.
John, quick question.
Yes,
where would you fit, like in the order then in terms of adoption? If someone comes to like GitLab, right? Where would cloud native then fit within, like, say, is it after CI and VCC, or is it like parallel? Or
I honestly believe that if someone's trying to solve for cloud native, if they're working on a cloud native project, and if you go back to the slides that you shared earlier,
yeah,
I think they're touching lots of GitLab. I think they're adopting basically GitLab because of what we provide with the ability to help manage Kubernetes and microservices. I think they're touching on many of these. I don't know for sure if they are going to go sequentially from one to the other. That's why cloud native is represented this way. It's curious. I haven't dug deeper into this. What you're seeing with my analysis was from about 2 weeks ago. I put that together, and I haven't had a chance to go to double click in and go deeper. But the cloud native thing definitely piqued my curiosity, and it's something that I want to make sure you're aware of it. So as we build out plans, we can make sure we have at least flexibility to think about touching it in the future. Let's not rule it out, is all I'm saying.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's also, for me, it's very helpful to understand the context on like where in the adoption, just because like you'll see later as I kind of go through the this journey, it's like, when will we start offering, for example, cloud native, or should it be?
So the way I think of it, here's the way I think of it, is if an organization said, or a team has said, we're going to adopt cloud native and microservices and architecture as a way of thinking about the way we develop applications, that's when we're talking about cloud native, we're talking about people who've adopted that architectural mindset, and we're not thinking about, well, it's just this part of the life cycle. They're full in. They're all in at that point.
Gotcha.
Whereas when we talk about the sequential adoption of DevOps, that's where an organization is going through taking a more of a legacy way of working, where they're working their way through trying to automate specific practices, and they're doing it for lots of their development. And so it's much more of a development transformation, not re-architecting their application.
Gotcha.
So when we talk about version control and collaboration, we're talking about changing the practices of version control and collaboration for the organization. We got to get better at how we manage source code, period, full stop, across the board. It's not we're re-architecting our applications. but we're going to get better at this practice. That's why it's sort of the vertical thing of adoption. Whereas when we say we're going to reinvent our applications and we're going to adopt microservices as a architecture and a framework and it's called cloud native as a way of working, using containers and Kubernetes to manage everything, and we're going to build things into small incremental parts, then then that's why it's the across the board. It's not like you start with one and the other, then all of a sudden you're doing cloud native.
Yeah, you wouldn't get an entry port, VCC, CI, and then all of a sudden stop and be like, oh yeah, now we're going to go cloud native, if that makes sense.
Right.
You could essentially rework. You could have your whole development process not using microservices and not using containers like that, and then you could rework your whole process, right? Essentially to be cloud native, right? And do accomplish the same thing that you were going to accomplish in a cloud native manner, right? Leveraging containers, microservices, that kind of thing. And I mean, it goes well with GitLab because a lot of the qualities and benefits of cloud native provides, we do really well and we provide too, right?
I mean, I guess the way I think of it is someone who says they're doing cloud native, they're not doing cloud native in a waterfall way.
Right.
They're already full in on DevOps. They're not in the process of fixing they are in a more advanced state of things. And I'm going to assume that if I'm talking to them, I don't have to convince them on the benefits of any of these different parts. And really the story now is GitLab solves for all of it.
So will it make sense for an expand? Sorry.
Go ahead. No, ask your question. I'm sorry.
So will then this make sense more from like an expand play? Like an expand campaign versus a land campaign?
It depends, right? If I'm talking to the team that's building and re-architecting stuff, it's a land. If I'm talking, it depends. It truly depends, right? It depends upon where that organization is at and where do we get our entry into that organization. If we enter into the organization with the tools team that are working on a SDLC or a DevOps transformation, how do I make all of the organization more efficient? Then I'm going to land probably on CI or version control, most likely. Both those are the two typical lands. But if I happen to connect, or we happen to connect with, the architect, and she's leading the cloud native transformation, her team is in the business of, we're going to roll out and rethink microservices and re-architecting, they're the innovation team.
Mm-hmm.
Then guess what? I could land there too, just as well as I could land anywhere else.
Mm.
And the compelling nature of GitLab is, look, it simplifies all this. It's all in one place. You don't have to cobble together all the different tools, and the end-to-end story of GitLab becomes really compelling. And not only to go harder on this, is that some of the things we're doing as we're iterating just in this most recent release, we're introducing more enterprise level cloud native capabilities with the Kubernetes agent. And so I don't know, I don't want us to dismiss it because of what I think there was enough data in Salesforce that at least makes me curious. And if we're thinking on a very long horizon, it should be on our radar, as should cloud native. But the cloud native campaign hasn't showed up in the opportunities yet, and that's curious.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge too. We made our, decision based on whatever has launched in terms of campaigns, and that has only been like GitOps, VCC, CI, and DevSecOps. I don't think we've launched a cloud native campaign yet.
Yeah, but the sales reps are saying they're selling cloud native, so that makes it curious, right? That's why it's a data point that it got my attention. When I saw the 6 out of 7 wins, that ratio, that made me pause.
So it could probably be an experimental additional campaign that we try later.
I wanted to make sure you all were aware of what I saw.
Yeah, well, that's something for us we could chat more about that too, because I think, that's a strategy that we'll find a lot, regardless of where these people are on their journey, right? It's a strategy that they could be adopting, throughout multiple places, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, So just kind of thank you for the feedback, but just kind of pushing through the framework, assuming that, now I think I'm going to probably remove the GitOps portion of this, but focusing on CI and VCC for now, and we can definitely continue to build on it with cloud native and whatnot. Just kind of like with what we have currently, right now we're going to work with a lot of the account target list for the large segment. So I really start with the list. Sorry for this thing. So basically I'm thinking about segmenting the different lists into by stage and by use cases. So I know there's intent data, for example, in demand base, where you can identify if someone's interested in CI versus VCC. That's very easy. And then basically everything else. That's kind of how we will segment. And then within those, either the like unknown use case or like not use case specific, and CI and VCC use case, then breaking that out further by which part of the funnel they're in, basically. So to start with, for target accounts, for example, that has unknown intent or they're not VCC or CI specific, and just any inbound kind of non-use case leads coming in from like events or whatnot, we're thinking of doing kind of like a paid social, email, and display channel to pushing them to like a use case agnostic path factory track to let them basically, this is very top funnel, so like let them, it starts with the enterprise page, but then we'll follow with kind of like VCC block, CI block, GitOps, we can take it away, but like VCC and CI block, and just see where their interest is. And depending on, say, like if they identify that they are interested in the VCC block, then we will then push them into a VCC specific buyer's journey, as well as, and it will also follow that for those target accounts that identifies themselves as having a VCC intent. So it starts with target accounts with VCC intent raw. We will, automatically push them maybe using display, organic social, and then naturally they'll come to the web for organic search and web.
Is it accounts? Question, is it accounts or is it individuals or leads, people?
Leads within those accounts. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question about this journey you're showing here with the VCC blog or topic page.
Yeah.
For these, I understand that they're like raw accounts who maybe haven't talked to you before, but I am kind of questioning, especially the topics page, if that's the right place to put someone, because that's really a page that's intended for people who are educating themselves on the topic. It's not going to cover GitLab at all, whereas I feel like with these accounts, we probably want to make the connection to GitLab sooner rather than later. Maybe with the option to educate if they need to, but it just seems like I would worry about how we're converting people, or if it's a missed opportunity to show how GitLab can solve the problem off the bat if we sent them to something like a topics page. Like a solutions page to me would make a little more sense here.
Yeah, I agree. If we think they're interested in GitLab and they're already on, I mean, so the where I think of the two is that the topic pages which we've been building have all this fantastic educational content where people are trying to understand the domain of version control. So that draws them in. But if we know they're already focusing on this, where we want to try to tell our story about how does GitLab solve this problem is really where the solution page should start that conversation. And then we would want to be able to lead them further on. So the topic pages and the solution pages should work together at some level, so we could think about how we connect them. And it depends upon whether or not we're trying to talk to someone about the abstract. How does someone think about this problem, whether it's version control or CI or whatever, or whether we want to showcase, let me tell you how GitLab solves this.
And I totally agree with everything you just said, John. And the other thing I'm thinking here is, if we're not quite sure and about the exact intent of these people, if we came up with a single blog post that we are driving all of these people to, that describes the problem a little bit, but gets pretty quickly into how GitLab can solve it. It gives us a little bit more opportunity to craft a specific story for this person, but we could also test a blog post we put together, the solutions page. I really don't think the topics page is appropriate for this though.
Gotcha.
I think you're right. I really do think you're right, Erica.
And this is great because this is why we want to make sure we align with you all, because the top of the funnel, I feel like the content team is definitely right. You're part of the funnel. So
I mean, because we're really one of the things that Erica's team is drawing people in, and a lot of the content that we've developed, where we hope that people who are searching for how do I do blank with Git, how do I do branching, how do I do merge, how do I deal with merge conflicts, those kind of problems they're searching for, we want them to find those topic pages, right? But when the journey starts, that solution page really is where we're selling them. We're going from, this is where we're converting from being aware of the problem, but this is awareness where GitLab solves the problem. We're making the argument to consider GitLab.
that makes sense. Okay, so then solutions page, we can then, somehow if there's a way for us to link the call to action to something that is either like a top funnel workshop or a demo, and then we would also then retarget people. I was thinking with, using retargeting from that page to similarly drive to that offer, VCC top funnel workshop or demo. We would also then send the target accounts with VCC intent that's already in inquiry stage, having contacts in that inquiry stage, to using paid social, email, and display to the same offer. And then if, say, they responded to it, we will then put them into an awareness nurture, which is linked to Path Factory.
I would think we would also have a Path Factory path attached to this. And Parker, by the way, this is true for CI too, but I think we would have a Path Factory path attached to the solution page as well. It says, boom, 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 boom. Here's the other things you should see. I would think. Maybe
I would think so too. I would think that workshop is something that would be within a Path Factory experience, because the other thing we have to consider that the web team is thinking about with these pages is the topics pages, main CTA is a demo, and I think the solutions is free trial, and it's going to be a tough sell with Danielle to change that primary CTA from start a trial to attend a workshop or a demo. It's not impossible, and it's something we could test. But something like a demo definitely could be included in a Path Factory track. And that's where we could start to mix in some of the content that my team is working on, where it's, you have some options of learning, understanding how GitLab solves it. And if you need a deep dive into some sort of topic related to it, we might have a web article to put in there or something related to that workshop or solution.
Gotcha. So maybe not even so it doesn't link, it's not going to be the main CTA, but maybe almost like a secondary to a Path Factory track that then has the workshop or the demo. Would that make sense?
That would make a lot of sense, right? That from the solution page, you're going to point them to that demo. I mean, that would make a lot of sense, because you're on the solution page. And I get it. We want everyone to do a trial. Sign up for a trial.
Yeah.
You're here learning about how to solve CI problems. Hey, sign up for a trial. It might be a little bit forward, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that could also still be incorporated, right? I mean, even with other forms of content or a workshop, right? We could move that a little bit farther down if we wanted to, and say, hey, all right, cool. Now you've seen it. Now you're excited. Here's your trial, by the way. And then, that could I think that could be an option as well.
And I'll tell you the other element to this that I think is important. We should think about. I mean, there's the hands-on workshop, and maybe it's further on as we get into. It's beyond consideration. So as we think farther, and I'm just looking ahead, we need to start to introduce our proof points. We need to start to introduce the most compelling customer case study proof point, or the most compelling analyst proof point, whether it's the fact that for Gartner customer choice for application release orchestration, or the value that Goldman or T-Mobile or ... got in a proof point. Those are things that will be, I think, important for us to think about. How do we weave that into the Path Factory, especially as we go between consideration and purchase?
Yeah, for sure. Because if you're someone that's leading this effort, or you're a part of it, and you're like, oh, look, T-Mobile did this. Look what UBS did. Look what Goldman Sachs does. When you're up against some things where it's like, man, this is going to be tough. We got all these legacy, all these, all the excuses that could possibly come up. It's really cool to see a proof point that says, look, if you want to do it, it can be done.
This is a little in the weeds, but something to consider for that is pulling together some case studies into, it doesn't have to be gated like an ebook, but into an ebook for these tracks. Bree did this with the 5 customers who, using GitLab and AWS. And that's a really solid asset that includes multiple customer stories, all driving back to the same point of how you can be successful with those 2 tools. So it's another way to do that, especially for focusing specifically on these 2 use cases. And we focus on starting with those 2 assets. It's a way to pull that together. We still have the customer story pages, but it gives us some opportunity to kind of
brilliant. Erica, that's
story.
That's brilliant. We should absolutely do that. We should absolutely take each one of these use cases and think about a collection of case studies in a single asset, because that actually makes it easier for a prospect to consume, and it gives us a single offer of, let me share with you a series of stories about success of customers who've overcome this challenge, rather than one long one, because nobody wants to read the long ones. We can make it bite-sized. Everybody wants to fast forward through the commercials, so let's make it easy for them to do that.
Hey, John, what are your thoughts on, would you apply the case studies to all the personas, or would you just have that for the case studies a part of a specific persona group?
I think we've got to get smart about the case studies. And in fact, if I were to go back to the slides that I stopped sharing, I think we have to start writing what I'm calling a mirror case study, such that a persona can see themselves in that story. I'd like to write a case study about, oh shoot, I just drew a blank on his name, T-Mobile dude. Come on.
Hill?
Huh?
Yeah.
Hill, what was his first name? Chris Hill?
Yeah, Chris Hill.
He was
Chris Hill, yeah.
You're not allowed
I'd like to write a
case.
case. I think there's a case study that tells the story of Chris Hill as the champion who introduced GitLab, and how as a result of his role as a director, changed the organization. So other people who are in Chris's role, who are the persona of Chris, will see themselves in this
That
sort
exists.
of, oh, I get that. And in the same way, we could take a developer, someone who's a developer who brought in GitLab or a development lead and did something. So I think it's persona driven and segmented. So I think, Matt, the answer to the question is, our current case studies are kind of, they're not very intimate in the sense that you don't see the people in them. And they're kind of abstract. Well, we used GitLab and we liked it, and a lot of people are using GitLab. We've got to, I think, rotate hard on our case studies in 2 different directions. One around the people, making them much more, and maybe one customer we end up with 2 case studies, right? One's about a person, another one's about the business value. But I think on one hand, we need to focus on the people, make it people focused about the champions who drove success. And I refer to it as a mirror, like you're looking in a mirror. But the other way is, I think we also at the same time have to also really get focused on the business value from a proof point perspective, from a metrics perspective. Today, our case studies have a mixture of metrics. Some are tied to value, others are numbers that are about, well, we use it a lot. And I want to make sure, so I want to, as we kind of go into this going forward, it's not something for us to solve here and now, but it's something that strategically we have to do.
No, that's great, John. I think that you hit the nail on the head of, I think where we stand with our case studies now, like somebody like an individual contributor may not necessarily find those enticing to read or valuable.
No.
But to your point, if we're able to cater the case studies to an actual real world solutions and problems where people can see themselves in, I think has a lot of opportunity as we build those things out. So thanks for sharing that.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a
speak to
huge
Chris Hill
opportunities.
about Chris Hill in particular was the hero of a recent case study that I wrote, and also a blog post with somebody else from T-Mobile as a first-person blog post. He was a contributor talking about how the adoption, but Chris Hill put a block on this case study because they had also promoted Jenkins about 1.5 years ago, and they didn't want to make the same mistake by promoting GitLab without having the full proof points that they needed to support it. So that will come out, I think, within 6 months to 1 year. He's going to come back so that we have like more information to share, so that because they hadn't fully adopted GitLab by the time that we had written that case study. So just to speak to that, like the focus was him coming from, I forget where he came from, but he basically was the deciding factor in enforcing GitLab to be adopted.
Yeah, he's a Jaguar Land Rover, and so no, I get that. And I've had a lot of a number of conversations with Chris over the years, and I get it. But I use Chris as a poster child, and I think what we have to look to as we go forward with these is there is a class of hero-focused case studies or hero-focused stories that we need, which are, loosely, these are case studies. So there's ones where we're inspiring people to be like Chris, and there's another one where we're saying, look, T-Mobile saved this much money, or they're much more organizationally focused. Both are really important. It's not like one or the other. We got to do both. But so either way, I'm very passionate about case studies in ways that make people uncomfortable. I apologize for that.
Not at all. That's good feedback. We do have case studies right now in Path Factory for like the purchase stage or the consideration stage, but of course it's not consolidated into one, which will be awesome.
Well, and I think we need to really, and I think the opportunity, I haven't looked at them in Path Factory, but I think we'd want to look at really closely at the curation of the ones to make sure that they're the absolute strongest ones for the specific use case.
Will it be, I usually go to that CI page that Parker, for example, just using CI as an example that Parker put together, there's like case studies underneath that will be like, it says, speak strongly to the use case. Would that be the best place to go and pick those case studies, or how would you recommend?
We'll make sure we have the most up-to-date and best ones, so we can tag that on as something as a part of the process for me to go look and work with Jen to make sure we have the best there. There are some good ones there, but there could certainly be some newer ones or some updates that we should include.
I mean, we're constantly publishing new ones, and so this is a case in which we've got to continue to look at this, and we're getting better. It's one of these things that it's a team sport on how we do this, where we all come together. And I absolutely love the idea of a consolidated case study around a use case, where a consolidated ebook or document that pulls them together. That could be really powerful. So just like we did with AWS, Bree, which is really cool.
I mean, those are pretty easy to put together too, because they're existing case studies, and it's just a matter of creating it. So I think we can do that pretty quickly.
The book of success.
Yeah. So yes. Let's quickly move on. We have 20 minutes, so I'm gonna quickly rush through great ideas. So definitely we'll incorporate there. But then moving on to we were at awareness, and then we're thinking of initially basically surfing just like awareness level kind of offers on this Path Factory track, and then maybe 2 VCC specific, and then with the third one, we're thinking of teasing with like a CI sub offer. So like, if, you know, either in the nurture email, maybe just putting somewhere in there where people could identify if they're interested in CI. I think the idea here is just like the ability for people to kind of hand raise if they're interested in other use cases, and then we can push them to other like buyer's journey. Like, so like moving from say VCC buyer's journey to the CI buyer's journey. This is still an area where, like, you know, we're still thinking through how to best do it, but basically we want to make sure that if people are interested in other use cases as well, we're not just jamming them with one type of use case.
Hey, Agnes, these nurtures, just to make sure I understand, these are all coming via email because they have filled out a form in some way already. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Because they would have filled out a form on the, like, for the demo or the workshop. And then the idea is then we push them into a nurture.
And then do you have an example or an idea of what these offers might be, like content-wise?
Thinking right now, like maybe ebooks, or I don't know if that's too early, or just, you know, blogs for the awareness ones. And then, yeah, depending on the stage, basically. So like probably for awareness, it'll be.
That's probably something we can figure out in the overall Path Factory conversation that started this week too. But again, this is an area where, like, we have a lot of ebooks from my team that are very, very top of funnel that I would put in the category of topic pages, where if somebody visits a topic page, maybe we retarget them with an ebook. What I think of this stage, I think, again, GitLab should be involved in some way in that content, which is normally I never say that, but based on these journeys and where they're at, I think we should be careful. Like, if somebody has done a demo, we probably don't need to give them the like introduction to Git ebook or something like that, you know? So just, and of course, my brain goes super deep immediately on the content, so I don't want to derail this. It's just, I'm kind of trying to think what you're thinking about in those.
But you're spot on, Erica, and that's where I think these nurtures, as we're leading, as we're providing someone with content that is relevant, that we think they need. I mean, what we're doing is we're trying to anticipate their needs and offer them what we think they need or would like next if we get this right. I think you're exactly right. We have to really assume that someone who we're talking to at the top of the funnel is still trying to figure out a little more about GitLab, and as they go farther and farther down, we need to offer them progressively more and more of the right information. One of the things I think is interesting, Agnes, about the idea of offering, and I think it's worth experimenting, I really do, although I'm hesitant as well, is that if I'm engaging with you on all things Git and all things how to do version control and how GitLab does version control, then I can see why we might want to test whether or not I'm also interested in automation and, you know, continuous integration. Because if I am, then that should certainly make me more qualified. I mean, it would be I think a way these things work together. I think that makes a lot of sense. But so I'm saying that on one hand, but on the other hand, when you said it earlier, I sat back and thought, if they're already interested in buying, we think they're interested in buying version control, why would we swap them out to let's talk about something different?
I would defer to Matt. Do you have any thoughts? I know, like, yesterday we had a discussion about potentially wanting to.
Yeah, I think it's more around the flexibility to cater to what the person is interested in. So what I don't want to have happen is like trying to force feed somebody CI when they may not necessarily want to, like, that's not the path they're taking a look at. But if that's what they're interested in, yeah.
And I see it, Matt. I see it again. And now I'm seeing it as a sub offer. So if they opted into it and they went down that path, they're choosing that. Okay, never mind. Yeah, I'm reading this. I'm rereading this more carefully. Makes sense.
But this is a big topic of conversation that the campaign managers, digital marketing, like that we've been talking through, is if somebody enters through one use case, do we just stick with just that use case and make it so that they want to buy GitLab for that use case? Or do we make sure that they have insight into some of the other capabilities that maybe they're not aware of that would make it an even stronger case for going with GitLab? So I think we were kind of debating that. It's interesting to hear your thoughts on that, and if any other people on the call want to share their.
I want to look at some of the win-loss data in Salesforce to see between CI and VCC, but I think, you know, my gut tells me before validating that with numbers that it is safe to assume in a majority of cases that someone that is interested in VCC to the point where like I'm ready to buy will, if they're not already, will be interested in CI very shortly. Like there's not really many, I can't think of many cases where you just want source code management or VCC and then you're not thinking about the future. It'd be kind of like getting CI and not thinking about the future of, you know, automating your deployment with CD. The process to get there, now that's a different story.
Right.
But yeah.
It makes sense to weave it together. And frankly, it makes sense to weave in security.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would not leave out security. I think there's a compelling security story as well. I mean, in fact, part of VCC includes security. So we don't even have to say DevSecOps. You know, one of the market requirements for version control is about managing your code in a secure way, which allows us to weave in our security story without going overkill on it. But again, and I will also I'm going to read, this is something we need to think about really hard. And it's sort of, given my current reorganization and org changes, this is difficult, but I think we have a much bigger opportunity with GitLab Flow that I did a demo. Dan and I did a demo, or Dan did a demo with Bob, what was it, Rifleman, something like that. ASG. He's an author, developer, super technical guy. He's doing comparisons for us. But we did this long form demo last week, and I have the recording actually. And when Dan walked him through the merge request process of creating a merge request and then making a change, his reaction to what we shared was striking, because he was, it somewhat rocked his world, where you could actually see him think about what we were saying. He said, well, that's brilliant because that's so much more efficient. And so there's something to be said for us weaving that in as well to this thing. So I digress, but Erica, we should probably talk about how do we want to play that out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot, like in the sake of time, because we only have a few more minutes, my general takeaway, Agnes, is that it's really great to see this all mapped out visually, and it makes a lot of sense. I think this ties directly into some of the other calls we've had this week around the paths and the content in those paths, and getting that right. Like, I think what you're talking about, John, too, and some of these paths, making sure we have this learn content from Dan Gordon and pairing that with the customer and analyst content, and making sure that those 3 to 5 assets that we're dropping people into as in these nurtures are telling compelling stories. Mm-hmm. But the overall flow here makes a lot of sense to me.
Totally does. And
definitely have a lot to figure out from the content side. But again, like I said yesterday, I think we have a lot of this content. It's just a matter of putting it together in a way that makes sense.
Well, and it's then once we put it together, then we can start to look at it and start polishing on it and looking at how do we refine it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you, Erica. I think we have a lot of the pieces, which is again part of the reason why I think, you know, Parker, you play a really key role in helping, contributing to, you know, the being subject matter expert and understanding the domain, and we'll be doing this for VCC. We'll be doing it across board. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think definitely this is just a high level framework. So once we get into kind of like everyone's buy-in, at least the high level works, then we will work with maybe, you know, more individual, like the individual team, like understanding which specific offers are we going to offer for the awareness stage or the consideration stage or purchase stage, things like that.
Yeah.
Well, and then I think the beauty or the thing that I'm most excited to see happen is as we get these things going, of saying, let's experiment and see how do we optimize for these.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And then one last thing before I let you all go, maybe something to also ask for, let's say it's the reverse, right? Someone starts with the CI journey. Would we want them to also be able to kind of have like a VCC sub offer? Does that make sense, or does that not make sense because it's kind of like later?
No, it makes complete sense. I think that makes a lot of sense to talk about, to these two play off of each other. I think cloud native, I think security would make a lot of sense in CI. We got to talk about GitOps.
Yeah,
but
I can get up the way because I think it might just need to be its own separate, just from this discussion, its own separate like journey for a different persona. So I'm using that way.
And the other one from CI that makes a lot of sense is releasing, deliver and release. CD makes a lot of sense because CI and CD, even though we call them two separate use cases, Parker, you're gonna scream when I say this. They're intimately related, and the power of GitLab is the fact that they're intimately related. We separate them as two separate use cases because they play originally to really two different personas that generally they do. But one of the things that's super powerful about GitLab is that it's one. We think of it, it's one capability that we deliver. We call it two separate use cases, but CI/CD together is really one of the things that's a strong differentiator for us. So we should weave that into this and not make it, let's not find ourselves trapped in the fact that because we define two separate use cases under the, in planning and working this, that we go to market and we handcuff ourselves to that. I think we should take the liberty of weaving CI and CD together in our go-to-market on this.
Where it's appropriate, right? I think that's spot on. Yeah, that doesn't make me tick.
Well, no, because you and I debated. Y'all have no idea how much we wrestled over one use case, two use case, what do we call them, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I think for go-to-market, for our public-facing, how we bring people in, we need to weave CD into these two.
100%. Yeah, I mean, there's got to be at least one path where it's VCC to CI to CD, right? Because that's a very, very natural path for someone to take. And if you come in, just like when you come in for the VCC use case, the natural next step is to think CI. And in a lot of cases, same thing with, if you're coming in CI, you've got to have some sort of source control anyway, right? Because you got to have somewhere to store your code. So whether you're already doing that in GitLab or not is the question. And then are you thinking about that next step for continuous delivery?
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. We'll definitely consider that and build on based on that feedback. And then the rest, I think, if you all have seen it, pretty much makes sense. And we will be confirming definitely like this MQL and SAO paths with Field, just because, again, they are more focused on that stage of the funnel. But I think, thank you so much I think the top part of the funnel is really what we definitely need this group to give us feedback on.
And
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, just thinking about kind of how our teams all work together moving forward and making sure that we're collaborating with really not working in silos, but having that same vision. I think that sometimes the visuals in these things are helpful, even just at the onset as we get our feet underneath ourselves with the new segment alignment plan. But I think more to come on how we want to structure that and make the best use of everyone's time. That open to ideas. If there's syncs that are already on the calendar where maybe representatives can have at least an ear in the meeting to be able to speak that back to the teams, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Really good stuff. Thanks all.
Thanks.
This is really, really awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, we can put that in, Jackie, to our meetings too, right? We can always say, oh, this week would be good to, bring those in and whatnot. But this is awesome. The hard work shows. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone. Bye.